What is up, everybody? This is Marshall Lee of DonkeyJawProjects.com, and today we're going to talk about the importance of beauty and art. And to talk about that, I brought in Mr. Doug TenNapel here, which I'm sure a lot of you know who he is. And I'm sure a lot of you already know where to find Doug TenNapel, but just in case, Doug, let people know who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
Sure. I'm a comic book creator. I'm a video game designer. I'm a television show maker, although mostly I'm just doing comics now. And you can find me. I have a YouTube channel, Doug TenNapel, or I have a Facebook channel. If you go to Doug TenNapel, we have 150,000 followers. I'd love to have any of your guys in that audience. It's mostly just goofing around with Earthworm Jim. That's one of my creations, or Neverhood, or Cat Scratch, which are kind of my bigger pop media things. It's kind of, we feed that, we chum the water. The sharks are in there with the friends. We throw meaty blood of images of Cat Scratch in progress, and now my Earthworm Jim books.
Awesome. And I can't wait to get those books. I finally had the money to purchase some of the stuff, and so I got all three of your books so far. Should be coming once that's all shipping and everything, and then
sweet.
I'll be getting.
Did you come on the new Earthworm Jim one, or did you get in the Indiegogo one, the last one?
No, I got into Bigfoot Bill 2.
Yeah.
Or is that what it's called? Bigfoot Bill, right?
Yeah, Bigfoot Bill 2. We're shipping that out in September, early September. We're a little late.
Awesome. And so I went in for, the Earthworm Jim 1 and the Bigfoot Bill 1 as well.
So dude, you're gonna get some good stuff.
And then when the Indiegogo goes for the Earthworm Jim 2, yeah. I'm definitely going to be jumping on that, because I just want to see what because Indiegogo just has those extra options, where you can
you can buff it out a lot better than on Indiegogo. Kickstarter just sent me an email the other day saying they were going to allow me to open up a new test pilot thing that they're doing for doing add-ons.
Oh,
which,
awesome. They need to do that.
They're catching up. They're all catching up.
So speaking about that, you got that Kickstarter going, and it's doing pretty awesome. There's a link in the description, everybody, to find his stuff, and to find the Kickstarter. So I would definitely say, go and, help support another Earthworm Jim book. I can't wait to read these things out. I remember the game when I was younger, and, I can't wait.
It's insane. It is, this book. Let me show you what I drew just last night in this book, because it's so, it's almost like a dreamscape where we're at in the story. There it is. Here's the flying blind cave salamander from Earthworm Jim 2, and he's flying into an image of, this is a painful memory, which here's Bob up here. Evil Bob the goldfish, putting these memories in Jim's head as he's flying through the villi. This is the villi people from the game. And this is dead Psychro coming back to haunt him. So the big theme of this book is Earthworm Jim overcoming his fears.
That's awesome. I love how kind of you're bringing the stuff from the video game, and you're just building the story of what it was, all this kind of random weirdness that was in the game, and making meaning to it and stuff.
It's really weird because, and we'll get into some of this when we talk about beauty, but the meaning came from the video game, which was a weird, non sequitur, purposefully stupid game. And I have to take that meaning, which used to mean meaninglessness, and now I'm building this giant responsible epic, weaving all those levels together on the why he went into the thing. So I'm creating real meaning now that actually has responsible storytelling and epic stuff that turns into itself and builds up character and momentum and emotional impact and stuff. So it's kind of a neat turn to finally get to tell this story after all these years. And I probably would have screwed it up if I did it back when I did the video game. So now I kind of know what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And it's funny because right before we came on here, I was doing a little bit of writing work on a project I'm working on, and it's interesting because when I think of this particular story that I'm working on, I'm like, this is like me trying to do my best like Doug TenNapel impression.
Yeah, good.
Because it's like it's Calamity Jane, but she gets abducted by aliens. So
Oh,
then it's
that's
just
a
gonna
good
be
start.
crazy stuff like on weird planets and stuff. So I'm just like, what can I do that's crazy, in this thing?
Yeah.
So
Crazy
um
but grounded. That's what we do.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I'm really looking forward to is reading the stories, because one thing in comics, and we will get to the topic, but one thing in comics that I always talk about on my channel is like I have yet to read a comic that really moves my emotions. And
Yeah.
I love when that happens in a movie or in a book or whatever it is. And I've yet to read a comic that does that. And I've heard you talk about that you do focus on trying to get people to that point. So I'm looking forward to
I
that.
make people cry all the time. And it is hard to do in a book. You don't have the soundtrack, you don't have live action stuff. So it has to be in the story. And probably every other one of my books really brings it home. And I have people write me and say, "Oh, you got me. You got me good." I go, "Yeah."
That's awesome. All right. So, yeah, I mean, the topic kind of speaks for itself as far as like what I wanted to talk about. But I kind of it, been wanting to talk to you about this for a while because I heard you talking about it on one of your videos
Yeah.
long time ago, and I'm just curious because I haven't dug into things like I know you're like a fan of like G.K. Chesterton and like C.S. Lewis
Yeah.
and all that Tolkien and all that kind of stuff. And I've dug into that to a certain degree as well, but probably not as deep as you have, and just philosophy in general. And I'm just curious, what is your thoughts on beauty and its importance in this world and culture and everything?
I've spent probably 10 or 12 years in this space now, and it will split your head open. So it's hard to just kind of say, but I'll give you the big talking points. And the reason why C.S. Lewis, Chesterton, and Tolkien are so important is they were the last great Christian thinkers and writers who I would consider largely pre-modern minds,
Mhm.
pre-modern. So they were kind of at that bridge between the 1800s and the early 1900s when beauty was absolutely attacked and assaulted in the arts. So, and I don't want to demonize Marcel Duchamp or any of the modern artists, but they're the ones that did a lot of the damage to it because they just said, oh, we're now unadhered to beauty, or we'll find beauty in the grotesque or whatever. And you just see what it's done to art over the last 100 years. It has destroyed skill driven entertainment. When people complain today about bean mouths and cartoons and stuff, what they don't know is that the thing that undermined all that is animators stopped trying to make what Disney called the illusion of life, which is they stopped imitating life and representing life and started representing whatever mad self-expression was in any individual, no matter how incongruous or incoherent it was. And so that's what we're living in now in the arts. And I don't know how you get back to that, but that's what a lot of my stories are, is kind of they're talking a lot about almost all of my threats in my books are philosophical. There's, something deeply wrong. And it's not just like, environmentalism, the environment is being destroyed or businesses are evil. It's not even that. It's not even the bad guy's a Nazi. It's my stuff is really talking about the villain being some kind of a emotional, incoherent, postmodern philosophy is usually what's driving it. And that's what I've been reading for the last I'd say 25 years, I've been reading on the philosophy. So now comes the other complicated topic of beauty, right? The biggest thing to remember is, and I read most about this, what really turned me on and I think really articulated it the best is Michael Ward's book, The Narnia Code.
Okay.
No, it's Planet Narnia. Planet Narnia. The movie was called The Narnia Code. Planet Narnia is the book. Dr. Michael Ward went back into C.S. Lewis's books and said, everyone thinks that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is an allegory of Christianity. And he goes, well, if it's an allegory, why is Santa Claus showing up in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? It doesn't make sense. Like one for one. He's even called Father Christmas. And in Narnia, it wouldn't be called Christmas, it'd be called Aslan. So he started putting together these clues and he documents it all. It was his doctoral thesis. I don't know if it was Cambridge or I think it was Cambridge, but he cracked the code in the Narnia books and said the 7 different books are not a direct allegory to Christianity. They represent the 7 medieval planets, the spheres in the sky. And C.S. Lewis was telling you a fairy tale about the gospel using a pre-modern worldview that the planets represent things besides spheres of molecules in the sky, but that they're personalities. So the biggest one, the first book, is Jove, which is by Jove, and Jove is Jupiter. Jupiter is jolly, and that's why winter is giving into spring, and Santa Claus shows up because he's jolly. And there's all this symbolism throughout the book pointing to Jupiter. And then you go to the next book and the next book, and this one is the moon, the madness of the moon, of lunar, and so each book represents a different planet. And he just cracks it. And so then he goes kind of the why. Why would C.S. Lewis do that? And really he was presenting subversive storytelling to an audience. And it's because of what they believed about beauty. So the number one thing about beauty is it's not merely aesthetic. So we've all heard beauty is in the
eye of the beholder.
Eye of the beholder, which is a lie. Beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Beauty exists. In the pre-modern mind, it existed objectively. Beauty is objective. It is postmodernism that has fleeced an entire culture into thinking it's merely aesthetic and it's merely your taste. It's you like chocolate ice cream and I like vanilla. And that is not what beauty is. And so I did my master's thesis on this. This is back around 2010. I did my master's on the objective tie between beauty and truth. And I'm saying it's not just this surfacey thing. And so I go back to all these pre-modern writers that are giving a defense on why and how you'll destroy beauty if you try to capture her, if you try to make her subjective, purely subjective. If you try to unadhere her from truth and goodness, you'll destroy her. And how beauty isn't something that you can capture and control. And so since then, in my comic work, I've been in pursuit of beauty and trying to capture it. And I'm so far away because I feel like I'm an ugly person. I have an ugly life. Life's a mess. My comics will never add up. I've never had a lower view of the work, my entire career of work. And but what I hope comes out in my work, and you'll see it even in Earthworm Jim and Bigfoot Bill, is there is this heartbroken longing for something bigger and better. And all of my heroes, they can't touch it. So that's kind of my message to this generation is, are you lost? Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Me too. Me too. But I'm not going to give you a placebo drug to medicate your anger, a false cure like revenge, like vindictiveness, like being foul on the internet, like being shallow or just pursuing money. that would be me participating in the death of my generation. Instead, I'm going to point them to that North Star of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to say that there is something beautiful, good, and true worth pursuing. Come with me as I pursue it also. And
Right.
maybe we'll find some moments of enlightenment together. And I have found tastes and closeness to beauty, to that muse, that source, as I look up. I just can't replicate it in my art.
Mm.
But you'll see it in a mother holding her child, or a great act of selfless heroism, or the beauty of some animals in nature and stuff, and some people's paintings and works of art. You'll see glimpses of it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because it's hard to even like, I guess, peg down what beauty is. I mean, obviously, you and I share the same faith, and
Yeah,
we're gonna quickly point to God,
yeah,
and Jesus, but at the same time, like, it's still kind of something hard to even to describe what the beauty of God is even hard to really
yeah.
to say, and I don't know. It's just interesting. I'm curious to dig a little bit more into why beauty is not objective, because it's hard. Like you said, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder is what commonly people would say, and I understand that like notion. There is
Yeah.
something to that, but I don't know. Get it a little bit into why it's not objective.
Sure. My theory is that truth, goodness, and beauty are not subjective because they're actually real.
Hmm.
So that even Ayn Rand, who's an objectivist but an atheist, would say, you know, the objectivity means it is an object outside of you. It's objective. That's where that comes from.
Hmm.
Subjective means it's up to the subject. I'm the subject.
Right.
So even Ayn Rand, who's an atheist, believes in objective truth,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's easier to make the case that truth is objective. Now the postmodern says truth is subjective, but we disagree with that. And so many of us disagree with that. I'm saying, is murder is wrong? Is it true only because you believe it? And if you believe different, would that be true? No. It's easier to go to the most heinous things that we can think of and just say, is your moral anger at that the same kind of moral anger that you have at someone who likes vanilla ice cream when you like chocolate, or someone who likes the Rams when you like the Raiders? No, I think it goes deeper than just something arbitrary or neutral. It goes very deep, and everyone acts like they believe truth is objective. In fact, if you don't act like it, you will die. If you believe a hole isn't in the sidewalk and it is, you'll die.
Right.
If you if you believe what was the quote from it was laughter is the Jack Handy used to say, like, laughter is the best medicine, and that's why 7 of my brothers and sisters died of dysentery. If if you don't live in an objectively true world using some level of objective values, you'll come up against that brick wall and it smacks you in the face. So fine, truth is objective. Is goodness objective? And then once I make that case, is beauty objective? That's much harder to make, because beauty is feminine and elusive by nature, much harder to even describe than truth and goodness.
Hmm.
But in my master's thesis, I went to mathematicians, because it was very hard to find the subject approached by artists, but mathematicians do it all the time.
Hmm.
They would look at a 2-page long math equation and say their first thought about it was that it was beautiful. And that was how they knew it was probably true.
Hmm.
Then they did the equation, and saw that it was sound and it was true. So that was how the pre-moderns looked at math. And you start finding more and more of that stuff in science, even by guys like Hawking's and stuff that are great mathematicians. We'll talk about how math is beautiful. They use it to describe it all the time. Very strange that a mathematician is using what we would normally call something subjective or merely aesthetic, and they're applying it to something that we consider so factually hard and demonstrated that and then you go to the artists, I would say, have abandoned their charter. It was always the artist, right? It would be truth was usually better the grasp of the hard sciences like math and physics. And goodness would probably be maybe psychology and philosophy and ethics. But beauty was always in the hands of the artist, the writer, the poet, the musician. And we completely abandoned our defense of beauty and discredited ourselves because of it. That's why we're all seen as irrelevant and madmen and optional, because we've made ourselves that, because we don't defend anything or make anything of value anymore. We have this coming. And when the scientists reject truth and the mathematicians reject truth, they'll be in the same boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, from what you're saying, I'm almost thinking that like beauty is almost like, it's like a sign that indicates truth, almost like it's like, because
if it's beautiful, it's probably true.
Exactly.
It's very smart. And if it's true, it's probably beautiful and good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the three cannot be separated. Let me see if I can find, I'm going to see if I can Google real quick. This is a quote from Lord von Balthasar, wrote a lot on beauty and truth. Let's see if I can find a quote. I'm sorry to do this on your show live. I really should. I could just pull out my thesis, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's all right.
Okay, let me see. Oh, where's my glasses? They're right here. I've got a bunch of his quotes up and I can't see them now. And Google's not. Well, here's part of the quote. It goes, and we no longer dare to believe in beauty, and we make of it a mere appearance in order to more easily to dispose of it. Our situation today shows that beauty demands for itself at least as much courage and decision as do truth and goodness. So there he's really making them harmonize. Let's see if there's anything else here. He wrote just all these essays, and he's very quotable, but he is a thinker, and I know that a lot of the guys that traipse in these circles, he's kind of like the guy that's really nailing it. Anyways, he talks about, separate beauty from truth and goodness at your peril. And he said, if you do so, then pretty soon you won't be able to even grasp truth or goodness, nor will we be able to love, is his warning to society.
Well, that's interesting because you can find evidence of that, pretty easily.
Yeah, it's all falling into place, the stuff that he warned about that you see. And we are ugly, and we act ugly to each other, and we make ugly art, and we live in ugly times.
Yeah, and that's funny you suddenly talk about like ugly, because I'm thinking, maybe one of the best ways to understand beauty is maybe to look at what's ugly, what is ugly, and if you can see what that is, you maybe can better see that its opposite, or understand it.
Yeah, it's often anti-life and anti-optimism, anti-family. the things that traditionally we would find very beautiful and bring wonder and imagination and creativity.
Mm.
And kind of that aha moment. You'll see people fearing to be vulnerable online, because if I open myself up and take my armor off and expose myself to you and tell you I think you're a wonderful person, you're great, the Twitter response would just be, what a fag, you're a jerk, you're an idiot, how dare you, make a meme of you. You know, we take what other people hold sacred and it becomes our sport to tear it apart anonymously. So it's not even the guy's gaining anything from it in society. He's getting it for his own personal jollies.
Right. We have a question here from Stinch Wackbecker. A question for Doug. How could one approach beauty in epistemological, I don't know if I said that right, or metaphysical terms?
Well, okay, epistemology is just how we know what's true. So how can you approach it? I would only say that the love that you have for another person is probably beautiful. And I don't mean lust. I don't mean using them. I don't mean when you have anything to gain. Often it's considered like the love that a mother has for her newborn baby. She doesn't know it. It hasn't given her anything. And yet she would give her life for it. So meditate on that and ask, it's hard for me to come up with an epistemological, fact statement to embrace that, or I can't give you a litmus test where you dip this paper in and, yep, that's beautiful. But I think you'll admit that it goes beyond the aesthetic. Like even if the mother was a severe burn victim and the child came out deformed and she still adored it, you'd say, wow, somehow that's even more beautiful. How? It, in a way, it defies definition. It is difficult, but I'm convinced it's not only there, but probably the most important thing you can consider. And beauty is also probably the only thing worth depicting with our art form and pursuing.
Interesting.
I ate, thank you.
So,
my wife asked me if I wanted some dinner off screen. My lovely, beautiful wife. And just when she walked in, I thought, beauty.
There you go. That's awesome. So I think, one thing that's interesting is because you're talking about like, okay, beauty is objective. And then when they talk about it, as it relates to art, there's the criticism of certain kinds of art that kind of where the evolution of art has gone.
Sure.
But there is like also another kind of thing where, you get like punk rock or something like that, or, you get like sometimes some outsider art or whatever, like there's all kinds of different expressions that could almost be described as ugly, but is there still kind of a beauty in that? Like, I don't know.
I don't know for certain, but I suspect there might be. Can rage be beautiful? I think using that as a counter argument of, well, punk rock is still artistic. I think we'd all agree it may be a lower art or a more primitive art, punk rock. And I think of hip hop, and I think of graffiti, and things like that, that it's entirely possible that it only looks ugly merely because of its aesthetic, and really deep down inside, it's saying something that taps into something that is true and beautiful. I just don't see much beauty, because usually it is, and again, this is where I'll look to truth and goodness as maybe a hint to help define what is beautiful. Is there truth in it? Maybe. Is it good? Stomping on each other in a mosh pit? Probably just rage. Probably just anger. Probably unmitigated ugliness. There may still be truth operating within it somewhere, that, or goodness that's very hard to see. So I won't disqualify to only say I think there's better sources and probably more consistent sources. Because what you'll end up doing is then equating, the writing of Shakespeare with 99 Problems lyrics. And you have to say, well, what's the big difference? How is it that Shakespeare is broadly to the pre-modern mind considered beauty? And there's just kind of a coarseness and an illiteracy of a lot of modern art. I don't think it even has the tool set to really get up on that top shelf and start pointing to the ideals. That's kind of I'm not hard set on that because I'm still new to this and I'll be exploring it for the rest of my life, and it's largely mysterious. But I don't want to go for the easy answer and go, sometimes a parent smacking his child is beautiful. I'm going, maybe not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as faith goes, like, you could imagine that anything that God does or is beautiful, and there's things that aren't so fun
That's
to
true.
think
Jesus
about.
clearing out the temple would be a beautiful thing when someone defends the honor of God.
Mm.
And maybe if a punk rocker was doing that, and I'm sure some do, that's more understandable.
What else? Another thing that I think is interesting is that this is probably one of the ugliest things, I would think, is when somebody uses beauty as a tool to manipulate, and to actually, because to me, you get it in a lot of movies, TV, whatever it is, comics, and where, they're using beautiful things as far as like aesthetically, well drawn, well, painted, whatever it is. And they use that to kind of draw people into whatever it is they're trying to say, which might not be so beautiful. It might
That's
be
right.
not a truth or whatever,
Yeah, it can be very, people are evil and they can turn beautiful things ugly. The stripper up there working needs the money so she can pay to feed her child. You can twist it and take advantage of it. I think the act of sex is beautiful, but you can see also how it can be used in porn to addict a generation to, try to eat this placebo and connect with someone whom they're not married to, as if they have a relationship and they don't. So I think there's a lot where Marcel Duchamp took Leonardo da Vinci's the Mona Lisa. So this is one of the modern artists, and he just drew a mustache on her and then made a print of that and sold it, for a lot of money. It's very easy just to take something else that's beautiful and twist it and exploit it.
Yeah.
And kind of what makes it even more horrifying is it's very easy, as we've said, to tear down a statue. Very hard to build a beautiful statue. Very easy to tear it down.
That's true. I also think of the obvious kind of biblical example of Satan, the angel of light,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
He was the most beautiful and now is the most seductive.
Mm-hmm.
Seductive things aren't partaken in because they seem awful. They are awful, but they seem pretty. They're enticing.
So, with all that being said, I'm sure people have differing opinions and all that. Actually, let me get this question put back down. But one thing, I think that is interesting too is, talking about art isn't necessarily talking the same thing as talking about beauty. But I do believe, again, like, we're kind of asking the question, is beauty important? And also, I love this topic, is art important, And, like you said, it's tearing something down, destroying something. That's easy to do. Creating that's where the tough part comes in,
Yeah,
and that's where a more fulfilling activity, really, in my opinion. And also, I think it does help the world. When we put our creations out there, when we create, you know.
sure.
Um,
But so you have artists today. A guy cans his own poop, and it's called Can of Shit. And he I think he did 22 cans or something like that. And in one of them, I don't know if it was number 28 or something, went for $250,000 at auction 15 years ago. So you have that guy's doing art. You have women. When I did my master's, one woman put glass sexual toys inside herself and videotaped herself and said that was art. There's another woman who would take these eggs and fill them with paint and stick them up her uterus and strip down in public naked and put a canvas down and squat down on it, crush it inside her and spray paint out. That's art. So what's the difference between that and, a Bouguereau painting or Venus de Milo or the Nike or the Pietà? They're all art. I think the difference is some of them are pursuing something true, good, and beautiful, and the other ones are not. So that's kind of why I'm saying, and art becomes unimportant when it no longer helps, but hurts. People don't need to see the ugly presented. They don't need lies presented. They don't need badness presented because we're already surrounded with that. That's the default. So the artist loses his charter if he's not doing something that is worth doing. And I would say largely if an artist is doing that stuff, if your art says nothing, then why are you spending your life doing it? Maybe you get personal enjoyment from it, but the idea that you display it in public and then get angry if someone else doesn't like it, it doesn't make any sense to me. Whereas I feel like if I could charge your art with the very things that help alleviate suffering for yourself and for others, what a beautiful thing that is to charge yourself with. And that was the classic job of the artist, was to alleviate the suffering of the masses with what they pursued. It's not what it is today. And I'm saying if you start looking at your art that way, especially comics, which is a storytelling medium that uses visuals and writing, you might start telling very important stories. I mean, I think the book Maus is very important on the Holocaust. It deals with shocking issues. But largely what you see in comics and really comics came into its own in a real tough time in the world history. It came to be and got popular in postmodern philosophical times. So did television, so did film, and so did video games, last of all. So if only video games were invented back in the Renaissance, I don't think you'd have 100 Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto knockoffs. I think you'd have something absolutely amazing done with that art medium. Same with television, same with comics. So I'm asking you just to, jump into this time machine. And I'm not saying go back into the past, because the true goodness and beauty does not change over time. As aesthetics change and our culture changes and our opinions change. But it was as wrong to murder someone 5,000 years ago as it will be 5,000 years from today.
Right.
The good, to help someone in trouble, to do good, is as good on Mars as it is here on Earth, no matter what culture you're in. And I would argue that beauty is the same. It probably does not change. And we're so programmed to think of it as an aesthetic that it's hard to even imagine.
I think there is something in sheer um, aesthetic, though, that kind of is good when it's done. Something that's done well. Um, I don't know, like, because to me, like, you think about like architecture and like, you know, you could have, we've put up a lot of buildings and architecture that's bland and boring and not a place where you really feel like you want to live. But
Yeah,
there's also been a lot of beautiful architecture, um, and there's something to be said, like, I don't know, how about like a bachelor's apartment, as opposed to when okay, they meet a girl and she comes in and she makes it beautiful,
that's right.
and it's definitely a lot more pleasant to live in that home, even
That's
though,
right.
you know for the bachelor, it's like whatever's practical, I just got the things I need. It doesn't matter if it looks good, but it does matter if it looks good.
Yeah, it does, and it shows that you love other people. That, like my wife, we had a backyard once, and it was just cinder blocks. I go, what a terrible place to put my wife. So I'd buy plants, hang them around, and paint the wall, and bring in more aesthetically pleasing things. And suddenly you come out there, and there's a pond and a water garden and animals and shade, and you fix the environment. We don't, if it was just aesthetics were arbitrary and it didn't matter or something, we'd all live in cinder block houses. It'd be pure practical. And that's also my anger about modern architecture. The modernist international style is just a bunch of rectangles.
Hmm.
It's supposed to be very practical, but largely those buildings, after people move out of them, when they grow old, they wreck and ball them.
Mm.
Because there's nothing there to preserve of artistic merit. Whereas you go to France and you look at their business district that was built in the 1700s, and it's the most amazing, beautiful buildings you've ever seen. You go, that just looks like it cost millions and millions of dollars.
Mm.
It's worth it to my person. No one looks at a modernist monster and go, oh, it's full of wonder.
Yeah.
It's anti-human.
It's like, again, I can't help but bring in the biblical stuff, but it reminds me of, when what was it? I think Mary Magdalene was like putting like the perfume and stuff like
Yeah.
on Jesus's feet and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And was it, I think Judas was like,
Yeah.
well, we could have used this money, and he just wanted to take the money, but like, we can use this money for practical things, for something good. Why don't we do that?
He made a pragmatic, practical argument. And here's this prostitute,
Mhm.
took all of her savings, bought a decanter of perfume, and didn't even use it the way it was supposed to. She went and poured it on Jesus's feet. And Jesus is defending beauty there. He's saying, whatever that is, that's good. And Judas goes, he listen to how practical he is. He's even going and appealing to Jesus, saying, we could have used that money to serve the poor. Isn't that interesting? That Jesus was serving the poor, by the way. When a prostitute wipes perfume on your feet with her hair, is just a different thing that takes a little imagination that Judas didn't have. And he was probably going to steal it. It was probably largely for selfish reasons that he did it, but still, he made this argument that Jesus didn't buy. He's kind of saying, Jesus, if you're a real Christian, shouldn't we spend this? Didn't you tell us spend this on the children and the poor? He had an understanding of it that is mind-blowing and wonderful.
Yeah. There's been a lot of questions, and I'm sorry that I haven't been keeping up with them. But this is a discussion that takes thought and time, and
yeah, it's hard to read a chat and engage at the same time. I get it.
But let's see. There's one I wanted to get to. I might not get to all the questions. I'm sorry. I'll try, but this one's kind of interesting.
Hey, thanks for questioning, guys. Like this, spread the link. Be
Absolutely.
loving to the show. Be good to the show.
Yeah, for sure. Stinch Whackbacker, Doug and Marshall, do you fear that what people can do to the art you've provided to the world?
No, I don't fear anything. I fear no man.
Yeah.
I fear no man.
What about just would it disappoint you? You know, what would your reaction be? You know, if somebody, I mean, I'm sure probably people have.
Yeah. Oh, all the time. Um, Hollywood buys my movie rights and, destroy the story in a terrible script and change the philosophy in it. It really isn't my job to get worked up about that. People take photographs of my face, a bunch of Comicsgate guys, and put rainbow dildos all around my face and spread it all over the internet. And doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Don't care. I've been purchased.
Right.
So my job is to make the stuff and get it out there. And then what the world does with it, they may, by the way, totally not fund it at all and say, you don't get a dime and you go into the poorhouse for having done this art. And I say, you know what? It was sure worth presenting a story I thought was great. That was sure worth it. Now I happen to make more money at what I do than most people, but I'd still be doing this even if I didn't make the money. I was committed to it long before I made a dime.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to me also, like, I'm the same way. I don't really care what people will do with my stuff. And I think of what I think Jason Brubaker maybe made this point, or some, I've heard other people make this
He's
point.
a great man, one of the best men I know.
Yeah, he's a cool dude for sure. And you know, is like you're gonna think. I just think of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like they, you know, they put that out. It's been iterated upon over and over and over and over again. But when it all comes down to it, you can still always go back and read the original Ninja Turtles comics, you know? So like, it's still there, you know, it's just if people do weird things with it, they do weird things with it.
In a way, it's a compliment that they noticed even. That, and I see there's graffiti of Earthworm Jim, and I don't want to come off like a prude. Look, if my CD collection here isn't full of a bunch of Mozart, which it should be, but it's not. I listen to hip hop. I listen to, screamo, everything, terrible stuff. I own books all over the place of goofy pop culture screw around stuff. I love fart jokes and all that stuff. So I'm not saying that I do it perfectly or anything. Far from it. I'm the worst person I know. But when it comes to the kind of things that you want to devote your whole life to, and comics is a time-consuming medium, and there should be no fear. So don't go in there and go, oh, I can't make it good enough, so I'll make nothing. Wrong. Chesterton said anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And I think he's actually acknowledging that you'll never make something perfect or beautiful enough. What am I ever going to make that's going to impress God when he knitted DNA in the private space? I don't think I'm not going to ever wow him with anything I'm going to come up with. But I think as a lowly human, lowly artist, I think I'm just saying, where are you going to set your compass? What kind of thing, what should your goals be? I think it's good to have something more than just, I think I'll make furry porn and make a lot of money. I just don't think that's probably worth your putting your life into.
Yeah. I think that's one thing I was thinking too, is kind of identifying what's beautiful and what's not. I feel like there's something inside of beauty, whereas the things that kind of act like they're beautiful or whatever, like it is empty, you know. There's meaninglessness. It's like if there's meaninglessness or emptiness, it doesn't feel so beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
But
or it's twisted. They twist it.
Yeah.
And that's very entertaining to us today, to twist something, But I would argue twisting that thing is in the same neighborhood as when you see those youths go up to a Hasidic Jew in New York and just punch him out for fun and run off.
Yeah.
What is getting that guy off? What else could he have done that would be amazing? We'd spread the video around too if he helped them across the street. He could have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. Definitely one of those things you just kind of have to spend a lot of, you just think about it. I think something else that is kind of an indication of beauty too is wonder. That's one thing that we don't have sometimes. And
wonder and longing.
Yeah. But like you said, that heartbroken longing for something bigger and better. I love that, because that is who we are as humans on this earth.
Yeah. It's every man who tried to pick up a girl with just like a terrible, you're just like, hi, I got you a flower. Will you talk to me? You want to get dinner? It's like everything is clunky and stupid and awful, but you go, wow, that is the pursuit. You're doing something right. You're responding to beauty as best you can. Then maybe she turns you down and you're heartbroken and you long for her for the rest of your life or whatever, that is also a lot of beauty. I think of the elves in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, they have to leave this world. Why? And they're always singing beautiful songs and walking off in the forest, to the gray lands off on the shore's horizon. Why? That's Tolkien's view of beauty. And by the way, so is the friendship between the smallest hobbit and his gardener. Just dismantling the greatest evil the world has known. That's also what a great tribute to beauty. Yeah. Let's do that.
I was just talking about Lord of the Rings the other day. I think yesterday on my channel. I don't know, but I love. You can't help but love. That story. There's so much in it. There's a lot of stories inside of it, and there's so many things that are beautiful. One of my, like I said in the previous episode, probably my favorite character is Aragorn, and his whole story that's what a hero is,
Yeah.
That's what a real hero is. It's a reluctant one, and
and culturally he was preserved by the elves. He wasn't raised among humans. You have the counterpoint to him in his relative, the one doesn't walk in Bjorn, or no, Boromir. His counterpoint is Boromir. Boromir, raised among humans, addicted to power, thinks he can wield the ring. Thinks he can take the ugliness of society and wield it against the enemy and not be corrupted himself. Aragorn, however, was raised among the elves. And in that seclusion, that's what made him, he was drawing his culture from a higher place. It's what made him worthy as a leader and really made him strangely resistant to the normal human trappings and seduction that every other Isildur and every other human fell to.
Well, yeah, I think with Boromir, he underestimated the power of evil, that's, I don't even know if it's the power or the temptation, but that's what a lot of, even it reflects in politics and in the world today. People, one of the worst things is they don't realize how flawed we are. They feel like there's a way to get to an ideal situation, but they're not counting the cost of flawed humanity screwing it up.
Yeah. It's a mess. We live in a mess. And I'm always encouraging artists because it feels so stupid when you have to admit to your family that you're an artist. It's almost a confession. Like, I'm going to try to be a professional artist. They're like, ha, okay. Do you want to get a real job? You want to do something practical? You want to do something useful instead? My dad used to tell me all artists die poor, and as if the only thing that you have of worth is when you can't do the painting anymore. That's what drives your value up. And instead, I'm encouraging something incredibly useful. It's also incredibly practical to apply this to comics, and you'll stand out as rare if you're doing this. And I'd like to see a generation of artists, especially Christian artists, rise up and grasp this and start, because you'll make something I can't even imagine, right? You make something I can't even imagine anyways, because it came from your head. But I can't even imagine what heights, where you'll go.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. And by the way, I'm talking about even your little zines that you make.
Mm-hmm.
To make something like this that pierces like an arrow and tears down a lie and builds up a truth, you can do it in a zine. It doesn't have to be these giant books that I make. If you're going to make a zine, it's probably worth trying small.
Yeah.
See what you come up with. And it should be a joy. It should be a blast to make. We should be laughing all the way. That's what we learned from Gandalf. He's always got a twinkle and a smile. Perhaps a fool's journey, a fool's hope. He said when they said, "Do you have hope?" In the middle of war, he's like, "Perhaps a fool's hope." There's hope.
Yeah, and so another thing too that's interesting about beauty is it doesn't, like we kind of talked about, like the practical kind of approach and approaching trying to create something beautiful or do something. It doesn't necessarily seem like it's a practical thing to even do. Like it's might be perceived as nonsense. It might be perceived as playing, and what use is that? But when you actually do create something beautiful or do, participate in a beautiful act, it actually is very useful. It's like you can't approach you have to like flirt with it. You can't really approach it, by math or by, I don't know, what I mean? It's kind of hard to even explain.
It's working out your salvation with fear and trembling. It's terrifying even to approach the idea of beauty. It ought to make you shake in your boots instead of dismiss it and go, I can make a pretty woman. Watch, big boobs. And you just go. As soon as you have to really grasp it and wonder about it, you go, holy cow, I don't know if I'll ever even touch this my whole life.
Yeah.
And the audience is so conditioned to hardly recognize it when it comes that it might just dismiss it and go, I'm into furry. I'm not into beauty. And that's okay, because it's also worth, it's worth dying for beauty. It's worth dying for the truth. It is. That's what our great literature is about, all our great works. I don't think people believe that anymore, but it's true. And so if you aim for something true, I'm only saying it will be truer than if you just throw it out and just aim for whatever the hell you want to make up.
Yeah.
You might get close. You might do something amazing.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great to try. And I always see it as kind of my books. They market themselves because the proof is in the pudding when someone reads it and they go, holy moly, he made me feel something. I'm crying, they're saying. Or, I've heard just so many stories of people, what their aha moment was at the end. And I don't think it's because I educated them on all of this fancy vocabulary on what beauty is. I think it's because I probably tapped into something true that's been true 5,000 years ago and will be true 5,000 years from now. And so it markets itself because they just recognize it. I actually don't think it requires a big education. It doesn't have to, I mean.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, you could sit there and like you said, you did your what'd you say, your dissertation or something
Yeah,
on that.
my thesis.
Yeah, and you could do like those kind of things and approach it very intellectually, but at the same time, you know, a child can recognize it, and it's like you know what it is. You just it's hard to describe what it is.
Yeah. This is
Same.
all heady stuff, and we're using words to talk about it. And really, that talking about it is not beauty itself. So we're doing philosophy. We might be doing truth, but we're not doing beauty unless we use the words. And I have like a third grade vocabulary, so I don't even have the words, to get around it. But it gets very heady, and I don't want it to be heady. I use more simple examples of a beautiful flower. We describe flowers as beautiful. We describe a woman and child as beautiful. We describe acts of heroism as beautiful, even in the middle of an ugly war. I think we're all surprised by small moments of joy all the time in our lives. And I think it kind of sets you back and gives you a little, a yay.
I think it's interesting. Like it's like as you learn how to be an artist, or how to just even draw a figure in an appealing way, a pleasing way. There, whatever it is in art that you're trying to do, storytelling, like there is two sides to it. There's kind of the intuitive process, and I think that's really, like, you really need that part. Like that's helpful to get to where you need to go. But then there's a lot of people, like this kind of comes up when you talk about style and stuff. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people who do things, and it's like, you think of like Liefeld or something. I'm a fan of Liefeld, and there's some cool things that he does, but then there's some obvious things where it's like, if you just took maybe one anatomy class, you'd probably be able to do, make
Clunk.
better.
It goes clunk. By the way, Rob Liefeld, I make those drawings. He knows I make those drawings all the time too, where it just goes.
Yeah.
You go, man, I wish I'd redrawn that.
Yeah, I saw that one. You were showing a picture, video in one of your videos, a part of your page, and you're like, I'm just gonna throw a shadow over this, and hopefully people won't notice.
That was so bad, I just buried it in shadow.
It's funny. So yeah, I don't know, but the thing is if you don't learn certain things, like, by intuition, I can learn a lot, but then the day I learned that if I draw a figure in a specific order, it actually almost always looks better. And that is, start with the gesture, then go to form, then go to detail. What you tend to do intuitively is you see awesome art that you like, and you automatically start drawing that eye in perfect detail, and then this, that, and that, and then it comes out all wonky.
Structure's gone. Yeah, you can't fix structure at the detail level. And that's we get ahead of ourselves.
But the thing is, there is an intuitive process where I was able to draw certain things, but then I got to a point where I was like frustrated, and I did need methods and logic and, math.
And you need a basic skill set, and maybe the story that you want to tell doesn't have human anatomy. Maybe it is very broad and cartoony or abstract or whatever. The cool thing about comics is it's not illustration, it's storytelling. So suddenly your words don't have to be Moby Dick because it's not a novel, and your art doesn't have to be Doré, or even Norman Rockwell, because it's not illustration. This comics is a storytelling medium. So I'm even more going, fine, I really blew it on that illustration, and fine, the words are kind of clunky, but the story itself is what I'm focusing on, and it's always tight. It's what I spend the most time on.
Yeah.
So it's a storytelling medium that when you get more accustomed to thinking about story and what is it, and you realize that a comic isn't just drawings or words, it's kind of liberating because all the weight doesn't fall on the drawings and all the weight doesn't fall on the dialogue suddenly. It falls much more on the plot.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think of that too. Like, um, I've said that before. Like, I agree. Like, when it comes to comics, you could do so many amazing things. People have, but if the story isn't coming through, like you're missing the whole point. And if you draw, that's why I always say, you can. It doesn't matter how good you are at art. You can make a comic. Like, um, people have made comics with stick figures, and they've been pretty darn good.
Yeah,
It's about
pretty
the
dang good ones. Yeah. Yeah, I love them all. So the medium can handle, if you set up the brackets, the left side being just pure 100% beauty, and then the other side being just whatever the hell you want to come up with, punk rock. Comics can handle all that, and we're going to be walking all between those brackets as we create, or an illustration doesn't work right, or a scene doesn't work right, or whatever. I've got a whole library full of comics that are great drawings and terrible story, terrible writing.
Mhm.
And I've got some that are great writing and not so great art. I always think of Maus, the won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature by Spiegelman. The art's pretty basic, story's amazing. Watchmen, the art, Dave Gibbons, isn't what I would consider the most flamboyant artist in the world, but the writing is amazing. So I'm saying there's a lot of room to run around within those brackets and experiment. And I'm also a big fan of not fearing doing something wrong or failing at something. I'm really all for it's more important to get out and do it. You learn more by doing it and seeing what the response is than getting all heady about it.
Yeah.
We tend to read a lot, and especially because comics are a time-consuming medium, we tend to overthink it, I think, and fear pulling that trigger. And so there's a lot of book learning, and a lot of thinking about it and talking about, I'm working on a comic, I'm working on a story, I'm working on this, working on that, and not a lot of doing. So I think it would be different if I was in a different culture where they were a whole lot of doing and not a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
In fact, in ours, there's not a lot of thinking or doing.
It's true. So I guess we've really kind of gone around this topic a lot. I think there's plenty more to learn and ponder about it. But I would like to get a little bit into one of the people in the chat, Johan. She had a question. I'm not probably going to go back to it, but she was talking about how do we go about kind of creating our work, or how do you, Doug, like with your writing and stuff like that. And I'm curious actually about your writing. I've heard you talk about it a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your process.
Sure.
For writing a story and just like actually creating a good story, like
Yeah, my stories are, and there's no real wrong way to do it. Something Mike Barron told me just the other week. He goes, you don't practice writing, you write. So it's not, you kind of have to just do it. So, but my plots are extremely structured, hard 3-act structure is what I do. And that's to keep me from getting in trouble, because my mind will just take this thing off this world, and maybe one day I'll do one of those books where I just let myself take off. But I tend to be real heavy on the beginning, middle, end. What is a beginning? What is a middle? What is an end? And then there's usually two turns, one that mandatorily gets you out of the beginning. So you stop beginning your book and you turn into the second act, which is the development of your story, developing and building ideas. You're not introducing ideas anymore. And then the next turn necessarily forces it into the end. That is the resolution of what you've been building to. I usually start at my end because I want to know if the story's worth telling. And I don't know if, and to me, I don't like a story that's amazing and then it has a terrible ending.
Mm.
And I don't want to work on one for 6 months or a year before I find out the ending is terrible. Here I've drawn all this stuff, amazing stuff right up to this point. And I go, I didn't know where it was going to land. So usually I know where it's going to land, and then I reverse engineer a beginning from that so it has somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And then, so if at the end, the big thing is Earthworm Jim is freed as a slave because he overcomes his fear. You know, the theme of it is that fear creates slavery. And that includes, for an artist, you know, fear of making income, fear of being good enough. What will you compromise if I can scare you? What freedom can I get you to give up? And then from there, of course, the beginning of it is going to be he's going to start in slavery. He is very fearful, and you know, there's moments where he's just easily terrified and easily scared, and you know, making wrong decisions, making immoral decisions because of it. And then, so once I've set that up, so I have the beginning set up, I know where it's going at the end, and then I create that middle, which for me is usually a number of counter arguments. And you'll see this a lot in logic. Like if I say, you know, A is A, this eraser is an eraser. And you might challenge me and say, what if your brain is just in a vat and that eraser isn't real? You know, you'll give me a counter argument and then I'll answer it. I'll say, well, what if this eraser was sitting right outside of that vat? Would this eraser not still be an eraser? You know, and so the second act is where you start making moral cases for and against your argument. So, and magically it stays on topic of your big theme, right? And you don't want your hero just to come up with an easy example at the beginning of the second act and be done with it. You want this thing to cost him something, to create a struggle, for him to work through these things. It's very difficult. Ask the hardest questions against your premise. And so that when he comes through it and pops out, births into the third act, and he finally defeats it, you know he earned it. It wasn't just thrown on him. He did his homework. He showed his work. That's kind of the, if I was going to, I mean, I've taught on this again for 20 years, but that's kind of where those are the kind of the bigger things that come through my things. And it doesn't matter to me how many scenes, how many note cards, how many characters, they all, unless that structure I came up with is just something I made up and there's nothing really true about it, I think it's pretty true. That is, I think we start somewhere in life, probably usually in our teens, when our adult mind is awakened and we see that the world sucks and you want to negotiate it, navigate it. And through your 20s, you make mistakes. And many of us might lose our faith or whatever, or have a fallout with our dad in our teens. And, you know, there's all these kind of arguments and counter arguments that go on. And then you come to a point of wisdom in adulthood because you have gone through that gauntlet, that you've gone through the fire. And you're a different person than you were when you were 14. You're still 14. You're still, that 14-year-old kid is still in you. You may still have those slavish addictions or problems because they make up your person, but now you've learned to navigate it. And when you show that you're a world altering ninja who has conquered these things, no one will say, you'll be able to say like, oh, see, I went through this and I learned this, and I went through that, I learned that. I lost this job embezzling, went to jail, got divorced, got my arm chopped off. You know, like you'll go through these things that all mean something, big major events. You're not going to talk about trivia of I keep my brushes in a bottle. You know, it's not, that's off topic. You're going to go through the major things that changed you and made you learn. This is why I'm not a racist today, or this is why now I, you know, take care of children. And just watch like Groundhog Day. Look at where he starts and look where the character ends.
Yeah.
Well, did he not earn it throughout the second act of living the same day over and over again and trying to land Andy McDowell and cheat? And, you know, he tries good works, helping the homeless guy. And by the end, we're convinced, yeah, he earned that relationship with that girl.
Mm. Yeah.
So you'll see it working. And it's not like Harold Ramis, who wrote that or directed that movie. It's not like these are born again Christians or brilliant men or anything. I think they're tapping into those ideal truths that are hanging out there, and he brought one home.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, even I actually heard something recently where Stan Lee was talked about, you know, that he tried to, when he was writing, he tried to talk about universal truths, you know, things that most people can agree on, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, like you don't have to be, you know, a person of faith necessarily to.
Yeah. You don't have to be a genius. It really should be easier than it is. It's really more of a choice. It's a choice that you choose to pursue. And then once you pursue that, and once you grasp, to me, the 3-act structure is the simplest there is, because it's beginning, middle, end. Everything, even this sentence, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I just think that's demonstrably the most stripped down way that I can teach it. And I think we all do it already. If I ask you, well, what'd you do last week? That's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. And your mind, if you're a very entertaining person and friend and storyteller, you might even come up with a really cool ending first and go, what will I tell Doug about my week? Well, there was that time I went to jail. And so then you'll reverse engineer. I was going down the road and everything was fine. And I was just needed to get some Twinkies. And I go to the store and there's a cop outside, you know, and at the end you're like, and that's how I got my DOI and ended up in jail. And I go, wow. You know, and you're a natural storyteller. You didn't have to sit there and write it and craft it. Your mind went to the end. You reverse engineered the beginning. You filled in all the interesting details. Hopefully you cut all the garbage out if you're a good storyteller. And at the end I go, wow, that's how easy it should be.
Yeah.
We're natural storytellers. And we've done nothing but consume story. Look at how many movies and TV shows and books we've read and all that. You're a way bigger expert on the subject than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. You talk about the 3-act structure, and you know, it's funny because I guess I tend to I obviously use the 3-act structure, but I use almost as a cheat sheet. I use Dan Harmon's story circle.
Oh, and he's fantastic on that. Yeah. So his is 8 steps, the 8-step circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue it's largely 3-act, but he puts such a split in that second act of the turn that it bifurcates the story into 2.
Yeah. And
then he just kind of has quarterly moments that work out the same. But his first, I would say, 2 or 3 moments are very close to a first act.
Yeah.
And then going around the clock, number 4, 5, 6, and I would argue maybe 7 are a lot like a second act, and then probably 6, 7, and 8, specifically 7 and 8 would be the third act. And you'll reverse engineer a great story. Again, he simplified something very complex, and he was reading Joseph Campbell and Sid Field, and he's Jungian in his philosophy. But put a lot of brilliant work into that structure and came up with something great. I think it's great to use other people's structures. And I've used Dan Harmon's 8-step circle or whatever, the descent down and the ascent up and all that a lot on story. I read a lot of story structure books all the time. If it works for you, use it. Not because it's perfect or right or it will fix your art, but it will give you something to do. And you'll start hanging structure there. And all of those steps that he makes, he gives a brief explanation on the why,
Mm-hmm.
start with a character. He's in a place of comfort, but something is wrong.
Yeah.
Those are good reasons to go with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I use it, like I said, I use it almost like a cheat sheet because it's hard to just comprehend everything about story when you're trying to just write, and I like to do that right from the outset. Like I literally put those 8 bullet points and I write like a sentence or a couple sentences. I try to find out what my whole story is before I actually start writing
Very
because
good. Very good.
again, I think of it like creating, drawing a figure. You have to start with the gesture. So that
It's
story starts to
exactly
me
like drawing. It's the
the
same with
gesture.
music. It really is all all the arts are very similar, and all the arts, you can tell when something has structure and when something doesn't.
Mhm.
And I think we respect structure more, and you can still love something that's just a free flow of consciousness. I think Coen brothers are getting there quite a bit. I think David Lynch writes in that world a lot too. But the things that we really enjoy that make a lot of money that everyone talks about has a pretty rock solid structure.
Mm. Yeah,
More people can enjoy it and hang hooks on it.
for sure.
So when I write my stories, I always start with note cards, and or even it might even be like 3 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper that I'm just writing all this stuff out. It's very structured. If I could show you, I don't know if I have any of my journals here, but it's literally, I'll draw the 2 lines down the middle to show the 3 acts split up, and I'll draw a line from the lower left hand to the upper right hand showing kind of the build. It has a visual representation of the build. I'll even write at the top of those 2 lines, turn 1, turn 2. I'll write the word act 1, 2, 3. I'll write my ending first. I'll reverse engineer my beginning. I'll start putting in, and there's other stuff where I go, you know what? On Bigfoot Bill 2, I just want this Kraken to take over a motorcycle and have him drive it up the side of a building. There was no story reason for that. So I go, where am I going to put that? And I looked at my structure and I go, ooh, it can go right here. And then as I write the story, I'm giving reasons why that's going to happen. And, oh, that happened,
Mm-hmm.
But largely you can still put all the candy in that you really want to put in, stuff that might even defy your structure. But when you're done with the candy moment, you jump right back into your structure. So you're not just off on Mars completely ruining your story. You can do all the fun, tell gags, put your action in, goof around, and then you can get right back on it and you know where you must go.
Yeah, so it's like a back and forth thing. It's funny that you said that because that was literally going to be my next question. Like, how do you not get lost in humor? Because I know you put a lot of that in your comics and stuff. Do you think of so you kind of do? You think probably of jokes and stuff independently of your
Yeah,
story,
completely
and just infuse
independently.
them in.
In fact, a lot of times the jokes I'm adding in dialogue. So here's a whole script that I write in final draft. This is towards the tail end of Earthworm Jim. This is the size of the actual script. And it's got all kinds of notes, in the borders, and I'm doing panel breakdowns and stuff, but it reads like a pretty normal script. I'll do thumbnails on the left side. In the margin, sometimes I'll do a thumbnail of the page and do the 3. Like here's one right here. I'll do the, visual panel breakdown to see, and then I have the panels right over here. I know what words are going in it. Going from note cards to script, it's great because I will not go to script until that structure is something it's perfect and I don't want to change it.
Mm.
And so now I can build anything on top of that and bury that structure as deep as I want. I could do a 5-book series on one script and just say, you know what, screw around all you want. You got your structure down.
Mm.
And I'm not in trouble, because I know that structure, it's going to be going somewhere. And then by the time I write out the whole story on a first draft, which is terrible. but the first draft is just like clunking through the points, making everything feed into itself pretty well. And then I go through and I take a character pass, and I've got all my characters separated out, and this is how they're different, right? And I'm going to go in and start pushing their dialogue into their character voices. So they're still accomplishing the same story. Like someone, and I might not even assign a name to who says something. They made us a fact has to happen through dialogue where he'll go, "Where's that cell phone?" The other guy goes, "Right here." And I don't even know who's going to say it, but I know that has to be said.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll assign that, say, as I think about the character, and I'm letting him live in that scene. I want him to exist and live, and dialogue will just start blowing up with them arguing over what cereal is best, you know? And then suddenly they'll get on cell phones, and it might be a dumb guy who very intelligently might say, "What we need right now is a communication device." Or it might be a dumb guy. "Wish I could sure talk to someone from this room all the way across the United States." And another guy will go, "You mean like the cell phone?" You know, so you can build up a humor thing. And then, so that's in the dialogue, and I'm rewriting it as I'm drawing too. I'm adding gags and stuff. But really, all of the dialogue gets thrown into the script, right, as is, into the final pages. I'll just drop word balloons and drop dialogue over a character's face, you know, of what he's going to say. And after the book is, and I'll even draw word balloons around bad dialogue. And then so now the book is done. And then I go, now let's fix this thing. Now let's bump it up to the next level. And I'll go in and I'll add whole dialogue things of humor. If I have to add a panel, I will. So basically, I'm rewriting this thing at the note card stage, outline stage, script stage. As I draw it, I'm rewriting on the script, you know, and doing a new thing. And then when the dialogue goes in, the final pass, I'm doing the final rewrite. So I've rewritten this thing 5 or 6 times by the time it goes. And then I give it to an editor, and then she'll read it. Christina Lynn is my editor, and she reads it, you know, 1 pass for factual errors or ideas for gags or moments, you know, that she could add, and 1 pass for grammar and punctuation. So it's more like, is this, you know, did I misspell something?
Yeah.
And then it goes to press. So.
Now, when you develop characters, is that like an independent process, or is that within the structure of just building the story? Or
it usually has to do with structure. So if I have an ending, I want it to be deeply involved with my main character, you know. Sometimes a story can be about a group, like in the case of The Incredibles. It's about a family of 4. It's not about any one of them. The family of 4 is one character. That's rare. Usually there's one main protagonist. And I always want that theme, the moral theme at the end that he grasps, to be about his soul and his or her journey. So and then I start breaking out other characters who are always in service of that lead character, and they have to be involved in that plot in some way. And that keeps them on topic too.
It's so like complex, like story is so complex.
But it's even worse without structure. So if you don't follow rules, the complications are so exponential when you can do anything that it really is a mess of spaghetti. And so this is about trying to get some rules so that you at least have somewhere to go. Because frankly, let's be honest about this. You can write and draw anything at any time. You could make your comic and say, I'm writing the whole thing, and it's only going to exist on the edge of every page. The actual pages are going to be blank instead of the edge. I'm going to write it on the edge. You have to look at it with an electron microscope. I mean, you can do anything you want. There's no rules. So as far as what can you do, you can do anything. But if you want to tell a story in mass media that a lot of people want to read, and you're going to pay to print a book, and you want more people to read it than less, then you have to start talking about the kinds of things that we understand about the genre.
Right. That's the thing too, is like, I think an artist might approach a story and they be like, I know for me, there is something in me that, if I hear that there's a way that people do it, sometimes I feel like I want to prove them wrong and say I'll do it a different way and still do it, whatever.
Yeah.
I've had that in me. I don't necessarily follow it a lot of times, but there is that thing. But at the same time, when it comes to story, for me, I do want to go with some of the structure and some of the traditions and stuff, because like the part that's the art for me is, like you say, like the themes and this actual story. Like I'm trying to bring some things across, some things that I want to express, and I'm just using like this container of what we know story to be as just something to do that through. The art is actually inside of it or something. I don't know. Right. If that makes
sense. And I do think you, Marshall, as a story creator, is more important. You're more important. If I'm trying to get you to work, I want you to make something. If I can inspire you to make something by saying, prove me wrong, and go make something totally against everything I've said, if that gets you to move, then let's do that.
True. Yeah.
Usually the rules help liberate people and get them going. But if the rules are getting in the way, I don't want that to stop people from, because you might discover something yourself,
Yeah.
It's more important. That's my bottom line theme. It's more important to make than not.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's why the artist is really here. It's not to talk about art. That's philosophy. It's to do it. And that's art.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's funny because I don't know, maybe now at this point it's 10 years ago or something, but at one point, I was like, you know what, I need to learn how to write a story. And so I was like, I'm going to try to find the book that tells you,
There's tons of them and they're very helpful.
Yeah. And the one I think I started with was, what was it? Invisible Ink, which I thought was pretty intriguing.
The Pixar guy did that.
What's that?
Was it the Pixar guy that did that?
I think so. It's been a while.
That guy, Pixar, was one of their story guys. Isn't that Invisible Ink?
Yeah, it might have been. I think it was. So, anyways, what I found out though, I was like, okay, I'm gonna really focus on this, and in a few months or something, I should be able to figure out what story is and how to do it. And what I found out, and kind of disappointingly found out, but is that story is one of those things where it's like, this is the journey for the rest of your life. Like you're not going to figure it out, but you can, it's going to be something you just have to keep doing and doing and doing. And, you'll get a knack for it maybe, but
yeah, it's like pursuing beauty. It is so evasive.
Yeah.
And it will break your heart. And that's why so many writers are just furious, even at their own work. They talk about writing almost like, they're throwing it out of themselves kind of thing. But it's worth doing. I've got 20 graphic novels under me and a bunch of other little side projects and stuff. And I feel good about it. It's not a sense of pride or anything. It's just like, I love that there's a body of work. I think it very much represents me. It's very much my signature.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what I have to say to the world, I guess. It's not very satisfying beyond that. It doesn't feel like I'm Melville or even a Mignola. I'm just not where I want to be. I'm not great, but I have so much fun. I sit at this table when I'm inking a page, man. I'm just the happiest guy in the world.
Yeah, I feel the same way, like sometimes it's hard for me to get myself to sit down at that table and do the thing, but when I'm doing the thing, I love it. Like I'm like, this is this is beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
And I like that you said there that, the pursuit of it, like it's like beauty and it's like I feel like, like you said, it's worth it to pursue it. You might not ever be able to grasp it. You might not ever be able to figure out how to reflect it, but it's worth it to pursue it. And you know, I don't know. It's worth it because beauty. I think it it's that whole thing of like it reflects something bigger, and it reflects it. It inspires. It causes
Yeah.
people to want something more than themselves, something that's outside of themselves. It really, when it all comes down to it, in our view, points to God,
It does.
Um,
It points to God and it alleviates the suffering masses. We love escapism. We've always loved a good story.
yeah.
We've always loved art, beautiful music, always.
And it kind of makes life worth living. Like we talk about with the architecture, if we all live in the same exact boxes and that's how the world's going to be, like it doesn't feel like it's worth it, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
need to feel like there's meaning and like something's worth something, because there's a lot that makes us feel the opposite of that.
Yeah. We're used to pretty utilitarian stuff too, like the idea that I'm just a cog. And if I'm not achieving fame, then why am I doing a YouTube channel? Or if I'm not, getting this, was it worth it? And if you're looking for secondary things like fame or money, then yeah, when it's that practical, if you don't achieve it, then you will be convinced it was a waste of time. But if you pursue truth, and it's true in and of itself, or beautiful or good, then even if it doesn't make money, it will still be worth it.
Yeah.
So how do you explain some of the great artists that were in the poorhouse? Mozart and Melville and, people that just were squandered into debt and they still made great art. We're so thankful they made that sacrifice. I'm so glad you stuck with it.
Yeah.
Because the people that merely made money at it, I don't think time looks upon their art terribly favorably if they're just doing it to manipulate the masses and make money.
Mm-hmm.
So secondarily, I want to make money. And secondarily, I do want to be famous because fame helps me pay my bills with my art. And then I get to draw more instead of go out and teach or, be a bricklayer.
It gives you the freedom to be what you want to be and do what you want to do.
A little bit. It has its limits because
Mm.
if I'm ready artistically to just break the system, and I don't think my audience would pay for it or follow along.
Mm.
If I made something really out there, and I'll get there one day. I'll do that. If God keeps me around long enough, I'll do that.
And the thing too, like you were saying with if you're trying to go for the money or the fame, and you could get to that point, and what most people find, and I mean, again, bring it back to the Bible, Ecclesiastes, Solomon, you can you could find all those things, but it's going to be empty.
Yeah, I'm going to have the same death as that scoundrel over there. So to be good, he says it's meaningless.
Yeah.
The man who works hard and the fool go to the same grave.
Yeah.
So maybe I should make that book and just say, screw all this stuff and
well,
nuke the world.
I almost hope you don't, because I want to see some more of the other stuff you're making too.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of it. I could still go back into all the other books.
Yeah. It's all fun. It's all worth it. There's a lot of artists have to have a full-time job doing something else to pay bills, and that's okay. Because then it really does free you up. If your work doesn't have to be the main source of income, you can go completely nuts in that thing.
It's true. Just go by a different name than
Yeah.
than your real name, maybe, like some
Yeah.
people do. All right, man. Well, this was a great discussion. I really appreciate you coming on. Once again, the link for the Kickstarter is in the description. Definitely go check that out, everybody. And once again, let people know where they can find you before we head out.
Sure. Well, like you said, I'm doing Earthworm Jim 2 is on Kickstarter, and after that campaign, I'll go to Indiegogo.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to bury you alive in a great book and great story. And I'd love to have people as a backer. I need them as a backer. It helps support me at my work table. I do also have a YouTube channel. It's under Doug TenNapel. You can subscribe there. Those of you who haven't subscribed here, you're crazy if you haven't yet. And then I also have a Facebook page, Doug TenNapel, where I'm always putting up all kinds of exclusive fun art. And that's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right, man. Once again, thank you. Thank you, everybody who's been watching in the chat and everybody who watches on the replay and stuff. You guys are awesome. And we'll talk to you on the next one.
Thanks for having me on, brother. I appreciate it, Marshall. Love your work.
Anytime. Thank you. You're always welcome. All righty.